As I've mentioned before on this channel, my grades were really quite bad at high school. I struggled with procrastination and honestly, it was just a really depressing time in general. I struggled with my studying, I couldn't focus, I was constantly procrastinating and getting distracted, and as a result, I averaged a D grade in my last year at high school. So fast forward a few years and at university, I graduated with an A grade in the top 5% of my university. I completely turned my studying around to the extent where not only was I getting really good grades, but I was actually enjoying my studying. University was an amazing time for me, which was a stark contrast from my time at high school. So in this video, I'm going to go through a few specific things I did that not only allowed me to go from struggling to study for even 30 minutes at a time to studying for 10, 11, 12 hours a day relatively easily, and the specific steps I took to turn my D grade into an A grade in a relatively short space of time. And if you get value from this video, check out my Transform Your Grades in 30 Days course where I go through everything in this video in far more depth, and where I also go through dozens of other steps I took and walk you through them, and also give you one-on-one guidance and support to permanently transform your grades. The link's in the description below for more information. Parkinson's Law. Parkinson's law states that work expands so as to fill the time available for its completion. So let's say you have a deadline for an assignment. The vast majority of students will wait until just before the deadline to submit their work. But most won't submit their work a few days before or a week before, but instead they'll submit it on the day of the deadline. And this is Parkinson's law, where you use the full time you have available to write the assignment right up until the last few hours. And that's something I realized just a couple of months ago that I was falling victim to with these videos on my YouTube channel. So on Saturday I would prepare for one video, and Sunday I would prepare for another video. And so on Saturday it would take me the entire day to prepare a video and to film it, and on Sunday it would take me another day to make another video. But I realized it was Parkinson's law in action because I didn't need to spend an entire day making a video. So I set myself a target. I gave myself just 2 hours to prepare and film a video. So on Saturday morning, I'd spend 2 hours preparing and filming a video, and another 2 hours preparing and filming a video, and it significantly improved my productivity. I managed to get done what would normally take me 2 full days in just 4 hours. But those 4 hours were really intense and focused work, as opposed to 2 days of kind of like relaxed and laid back work. It's also what I did at university. I set myself self-imposed time constraints. I would almost always submit my work to the lecturer a few days or even sometimes 1 or 2 weeks before the actual deadline, because I'd have 2 deadlines. The first deadline was the one that the lecturer set, and the second deadline was the one that I usually set a few days before the official deadline. So that way I'd never be rushing to get my work done before the lecturer's deadline, because I set self-imposed constraints to encourage me to get my work done well before it. Feedback systems. The journey of transforming my grades from D grades to A grades was rocky to say the least. I made a lot of mistakes, and that's completely fine. I don't regret making those mistakes. In fact, I'm very glad that I made those mistakes at university because I had a feedback system in place to allow me to keep learning and growing from them. So after you have a study strategy in place, you need to keep it lean. You need feedback systems in place to keep those grades increasing. And it's so important that just because you see your grades increase slightly, you don't just stop there and get complacent. You should always be improving with your feedback systems. So there are 3 parts to my feedback system. These were: I reflected on my day's productivity or performance at the end of every day. I reflected on every exam or assignment grade I achieved. So did I get the grade I was expecting? Could I have done better? What could I have done better next time to improve my grade? And I reflected on whether my productivity or performance was in line with my goals. So my goal at university was to graduate with an A grade. So throughout university, I was regularly monitoring whether or not I was on track in achieving that goal. So each day you need to reflect on what happened that day, what study strategies worked well and need to be used for the next day. but equally which ones didn't work and need to be stopped. Maybe you realize that studying at 3 p.m. is not a good idea because usually at that time you feel tired, so maybe you should bring that studying forward to early morning when you're feeling more awake and alert. Or maybe you got distracted binging YouTube that day and didn't get much studying done. And it happens to all of us where we get distracted sometimes, so we don't study much that day. But that's where your feedback systems come into place to catch those days where you're particularly unproductive. And so the next day you implement actionable steps to stop you from making those same mistakes again. Add variety to your studying. A study conducted by Dr. Judy Willis in 2008 found that studying using different forms of media stimulates different parts of the brain, and the more areas of the brain that are activated, the easier it is for someone to process and understand the information, and the better memory retention is. So when I was learning a specific topic, I'd make sure to vary the ways in which I consume that information. So for example, I'd read lecture slides from the lecture, I'd read textbooks on the subject, I'd watch YouTube videos, I'd look up other online resources, I'd create mind maps, teach friends what I'd learned, and write out the answers to practice questions. Obviously, I wouldn't be doing all of these methods in just one study session, but each time I'd review a topic, I'd use a different resource or different study method to learn the information faster. So there have been studies that show that varying the ways in which you consume your material helps with information processing and retention. But the biggest thing for me, the biggest advantage I found with varying my studying was that it kept things interesting. It kept my studying interesting, and so I'd be more engaged and less likely to get distracted. Because if you're just reading from a thick black and white heavy textbook for hours every study session, at least for me, it would get boring pretty quickly. But by mixing it up and learning in more engaging ways, like watching documentaries and listening to podcasts on the subject, it actually started to make my studying more enjoyable. And it was a big part of my transition from turning my D grades into A grades, because I started to enjoy the studying process. So it wasn't difficult anymore to just sit down and study, because I actually wanted to study. And that right there made a huge difference. If you want to be good at something, if you want to excel in something, you need to at least like doing it. If not, it's going to be an uphill struggle. And it's a really important concept, this idea of making your studying fun. I covered it in a recent video, 13 ways to make studying more fun, so if you're struggling with that, you can click on the pop-up banner above to check it out. Simplify and summarize the information. Okay, so this one is huge. I didn't really understand how important this was at high school, and so I wasted so much time studying and studying, but not actually remembering the information that I was studying. Because I wasn't processing the information, I was just reading it and not really thinking about it. Therefore, the information didn't stick in my head long enough for the exam. So when you read some information on the subject you're studying, whether it's from a textbook or a lecture or a YouTube video, it's important that you don't just read it, but you process that information too. Because by processing the information, you're moving that information from your short-term memory over to your long-term memory. And that's where simplifying and summarizing the information comes in. So after you've read about an important concept, you need to simplify it. So by simplifying it, you're making sure that you truly understand the concept. If you're not able to simplify it, then the chances are you don't really understand it on a deep level. It's what the late theoretical physicist Richard Feynman taught. You should be able to break down and explain complex topics in very simple sentences using basic terminology. If you're unable to do this, then there may be gaps in your knowledge. Once you've simplified the concept, you then need to summarize it. So this does a couple of things. Firstly, it makes it easier to remember for the exam. Obviously, the less there is of something to remember, the easier it will be to remember. So by summarizing a long, complicated concept into a short 1 or 2 paragraph, of course, it will be easier to remember for the exam, but also by putting the concept into your own words. And this is really important. You're processing that information. You're making sure you truly understand it, and you're processing the information and you're storing it from your short-term memory and bringing it into your long-term memory. So the number of hours I wasted at high school by just reading the material and not really understanding it and not really processing the information was honestly it's got to be one of the main reasons why my grades just weren't very good. There's no point studying for hours and hours but then not really understanding or remembering anything. It's just not studying smart, it's not studying efficiently, but I've learned a lot since then, and now I'm able to study far more efficiently using a few more advanced study and memorization strategies. I talk more about it in a video I made about 2 months ago called How I Study Less While Learning More. You can click on the card on the screen where I go through how you can decrease your study sessions from 6 months a day to 3 months a day, but still learn and retain the same information.